There's been all this talk about the money that you're getting and all this talk about our debt. I just want to remind my colleagues that it is factual. It can be looked up. Under 4 years of the Trump administration, unlike any other administration in the history of this country, they somehow managed to rack up $8 trillion in debt in 4 years. But to be clear, in racking up that debt, it wasn't because they were trying to take care of agencies such as yours that are trying to protect people and make sure that they have clean air, clean water, clean soil. It was so that the rich 1%ers could have their tax cut. And again, Project 2025 is about making sure that those tax cuts that will expire in 2025, that they will get those back again. Again, they don't want to take care of the people, and it's okay to have debt in this country so long as the 1%ers get what they want. I just want to lay that out.
The House Committee on Oversight held a hearing focusing on the activities of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, EPA. Representative Clay Higgins expressed his concerns about the EPA's new regulations and their impact on American industries. Here's what he had to say.
Administrator Regan, you said you don't want to lose the trust of the American people. Too late. It's already happened. Economic prosperity is the cornerstone of societal advancement worldwide. And the cornerstone of economic prosperity is affordable, abundant, transportable energy product. Ladies and gentlemen, and you young Americans across the country, please join me in loving your planet and living your life in a manner that you intend to protect your planet for future generations by recognizing that economic prosperity worldwide is a -- driver of clean air and clean water and reduced pollution worldwide. So the energy product that the world consumes, including the fuel that you use to get here, the petrochemical products produced by the fossil fuel industry that Mr. Reagan is wearing upon his back, that clothes that you're wearing, the carpet upon which you're standing, the finish on the chair where you're sitting, the petrochemical products that make up 100% of the phone or the computer that you're typing on is consumed worldwide. Our world being one, if you're concerned about the ecological impact of mankind upon your planet, and you recognize that mankind is going to consume petrochemical products, then you would want it produced in the region of the earth where it's produced the cleanest, under the most stringent regulations and the most industry-driven technological advancement to deliver clean, affordable product. That's the United States of America. Men like Mr. Reagan have carried a torch 100% driven by an agenda to smash the American energy industry. He's the one that's agenda-driven, not me. The American energy industry and the American petrochemical industry is, with no debate, the cleanest producer of affordable energy product and affordable petrochemical product in the world. And every one of you consume it. Own that. Because that's where we are. In the future, I have no doubt that there will be a gradual transition to things unknown. This is the nature of life. It's the way things roll. But to have an agenda-driven Green New Deal, anti-American energy, anti-American petrochemical agenda shoved down our throat by an administration that claims it's doing so on behalf of protecting the world's ecological stability, by forcing the production of these products into regions of the world that have far less concern about their ecological impact, That is hypocrisy at its worst. And I, for one, am going to use every authority that Congress allows me to legally wield to push back against it. Mr. Chairman, I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record the Joint Resolution 161, a joint resolution calling for the reversal of the EPA rule submitted by this gentleman and his department.
Without
Unanimous consent.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Regan, do you have plans for next year, sir? You have plans for next year?
I have plans for every year.
What's your plans for next year?
Well, my plans are personal. And I don't.
Well, I'm asking
I
you
don't know
professionally.
Well,
you have plans to continue your battle that you're carrying that torch for.
With you just assaulting me and saying I'm un-American.
You think this was an assault?
Now you want to know what my plans are?
We definitely living in two different worlds.
Oh, yeah, we are in two different worlds.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate
I have an inquiry.
this
Mr. Chairman.
hearing being convened.
Mr. Chairman, I have an inquiry.
Gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Mfume.
I'm going to reclaim
I have
my
an
And you have time left, Mr. Higgins. Mr. Mfume.
I have an inquiry of the chair. Mr. Chairman, we disagree on a lot of issues in this committee a lot of times, but we always ought to look and put a stop sign in front of ourselves when we start assailing by name the personal integrity of any witness. I mentioned this a few weeks ago with Mr. Fauci. It continues to happen. I want to make sure I'm on the record so that members of the committee on both sides of the aisle will at least respect the personal integrity of a witness before this committee.
The chair recognizes Mr. Higgins for his final few seconds.
This is the Oversight Committee. This is where government is forced to sit in front of Congress and be held accountable for their actions.
Mr. Chairman, isn't the gentleman's time up?
Mr. Chairman, but it's not the McCarthy era.
Gentlemen,
it's not the McCarthy committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And thank you so much, Mr. Administrator, for being here. First, I just have to, again, send love to Dr. Nance, who is my regional administrator. She and I love to go and give big checks in my district, so I appreciate her so very much. I also want to make sure that I level set, because I thought it was interesting that we were having an EPA hearing, considering the fact that some people in this chamber don't believe in this thing called climate change. So I just wanted to level set really quickly with you and find out from you if you believe that climate change is real or a hoax.
Climate change is very real.
Okay, thank you so much. I thought you may say that. And interestingly enough, you know, I'm sure that there are those in this country that are looking for those Nixon Republicans, those Republicans that simply just wanted to do the work of the people and weren't about sending out misinformation, disinformation, and continuously trying to undermine our federal government agencies that are trying to do everything that they can to protect the people. When we look at the Supreme Court in their recent ruling, again, they chose not to protect the American people. But hopefully we would get people in the legislature, and maybe we can get some legislation on the books to combat what the Supreme Court did so that we can get back to the business of protecting people. The reason that I bring Nixon up is because it was President Nixon, a Republican, who spearheaded the EPA's creation at a time where our country and communities were facing deteriorating air qualities in cities, where there was rampant pollution in our neighborhoods, and when urban water supplies were constantly being contaminated with dangerous toxins. I just would imagine that President Nixon would never stand for Project 2025, which wants to do the complete opposite of that. In addition, you know, there's a lot of conversation around rolling back regulations. My colleagues continuously talk about rolling back regulations and not really understanding the importance of these guardrails. And so I just want you to listen to a situation that technically impacted your agency. In 2018, Trump made sure that he scrapped a 2015 Obama-era rule requiring advanced braking technology on trains transporting particularly hazardous materials. That rule would have required compliance by certain trains by 2021 and others by 2023. But as Fortune reported at the time, Trump's Department of Transportation decided that the cost of installing these more sophisticated brakes outweighed the benefit. While it has been noted that technically the rule would not have required the Norfolk Southern train that derailed in Ohio to have such brakes, some believe it would have if not for Trump. Norfolk Southern estimates that it will spend more than $1 billion to address the contamination caused by the East Palestine derailment and improve rail safety and operations, which includes this settlement with the United States valued at over $310 million, as well as around $780 million in environmental. Regulations are made to protect people from potential disasters such as this. And I can pretty much probably guess that the people of East Palestine would have preferred that there would have been some protections that would have kept them from enduring that terrible situation. But I want to talk about a few other things, and then I will let you go. There's been all this talk about the money that you're getting, and all this talk about our debt. I just want to remind my colleagues that it is factual. It can be looked up. Under 4 years of the Trump administration, unlike any other administration in the history of this country, they somehow managed to rack up $8 trillion in debt in 4 years. But to be clear, in racking up that debt, it wasn't because they were trying to take care of agencies such as yours that are trying to protect people and make sure that they have clean air, clean water, clean soil. It was so that the rich 1%ers could have their tax cut. And again, Project 2025 is about making sure that those tax cuts that will expire in 2025, that they will get those back again. Again, they don't want to take care of the people, and it's okay to have debt in this country so long as the 1%ers get what they want. I just want to lay that out. Finally, when we look at where this money is going from this administration, Rep. Jordan's district got $500,000. The chair's district got about $1.6 million in EPA grants. Rep. Greene's district got $500,000. Rep. Luna's district got $300,000, and Rep. Perry's district got $1 million. So for Republicans that may feel a way about EPA and it allegedly pushing a woke agenda, I just want to know, can we get the money back?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Americans have been enslaved in $34.8 trillion in debt. And one of the reasons is because of the reckless spending of the Biden administration, all due to climate cultist beliefs that they have got to regulate and spend hard-earned tax dollars in order to control the climate. The Biden administration's cumulative new regulatory costs imposed surpass all of his predecessors. According to analysis of the administration's own published cost estimates, as of May 17, 2024, the administration had already imposed $1.6 trillion in new regulatory costs. That $1.6 trillion is almost the entire budget for 1 year for the federal government. These costs are several times higher than the costs imposed during the entire 8 years of the Obama administration, and they are over $1.7 trillion greater than those imposed during the Trump administration. As of May 2024, the EPA had on its own imposed $1.3 trillion of the Biden administration's total new regulatory cost, over 80%. An estimated $870 billion of these costs are attributable to the EPA's light and medium duty EV rule. But even the remaining $400+ billion in new costs are substantially equivalent to all new regulatory costs imposed through the Obama administration. Mr. Regan, you unveiled a new rule this year, a climate regulation. The rule's designed to ensure that the majority of new passenger cars and light trucks sold in the United States are all electric or hybrids by 2032. And that's approximately 8 years from now. This is an absurd regulation on tailpipe emissions limits imposed by the EPA. Inflation is so high right now. So high. Many Americans aren't able to even buy a new car right now. They're not able to buy a home. They can hardly afford their rent. I know many senior citizens in my district are having to choose between rent and being able to pay for their medications. This is absolutely unreal that this would be a rule imposed on Americans to the point where they would have, within 8 years, are they even going to be able to buy a car? Think about that. Think about hardworking families. Parents both working with their kids. They're just trying to get through life. And this rule that you have imposed is going to force them to, because of the tailpipe emissions, have to buy an electric vehicle. So I don't think many Americans are going to be able to do that. And it's going to drastically crush Americans who, by the way, pay your paycheck, pay my paycheck, pay for this federal government. It's outrageous. Right now, we have an EV euphoria is dead. Automakers are scaling back or delaying their electric vehicle plans. 7.6 of new cars and trucks sold are electric vehicles because nobody wants them. And then let's add on the reality of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles add 1,000 pounds or more per vehicle. That causes damage to roads, bridges, and parking garages. I want you all to imagine for just 1 minute a parking garage that has been built to hold the weight of combustion engine cars and trucks. And imagine a parking garage filled with electric vehicles. It cannot sustain that weight, and neither can many roads and bridges. Electric vehicles are too heavy. There's 2,000 pounds in 1 ton. The Delaware Bridge, for example, has a weight limit of 3 tons. So there's several EVs on the market right now that already exceed that limit for that bridge, for that one bridge. One electric vehicle exceeds the limit, the weight limit for that bridge. Tesla Model X, Audi e-tron, BMW, e-Hummer, and Rivian. Some of these electric vehicles exceed 8,000-pound limits on some of these roads. Because of the rules that you are imposing, this is going to crush Americans' ability to even be able to afford a car and send us back into the time before people could afford cars, and I can't even imagine that. In Georgia alone, we had the electric vehicle car Rivian. They're now delaying construction of a $5 billion factory in Georgia. This is a complete catastrophe, Mr. Reagan. It's a complete catastrophe, and it needs to be undone. The EPA regulations are unsustainable for Americans, and believe me, Republicans want clean air and water too, but the climate cult has got to end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It doesn't appear we have any more questioners, so in closing, I want to thank you, Administrator Regan, for appearing here today and for your testimony. I now yield to Ranking Member Raskin for closing remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make 3 points in closing. The first is that Americans want the EPA to be doing more to stop climate change, not less. And yet, we heard from a number of our colleagues on the GOP side today, as well as from Project 2025, that EPA's rules are hurting Americans. But that's not the perspective most Americans have. Most Americans want the EPA to be doing more. We have a philosophical difference or a scientific difference. We believe that climate change is real and is a dagger pointed at the throat of humanity. And too many of our colleagues agree with the erudite gentlelady from Georgia who calls climate scientists, and most Americans by extension, climate cultists. We heard it twice from her today. Well, if there are brainwashed cultists on the issue, it is the people who are following the conspiracy theories of QAnon and assert that scientists like Dr. Fauci are trying to invent diseases. That's where the cultists come in. Secondly, a number of our colleagues wanted to lecture you Administrator Regan, about the role of agencies, which are, of course, indispensable in implementing the will of Congress. That's why Congress set up the EPA. That's why Congress set up the National Labor Relations Board. That's why Congress set up the Department of Justice. And our colleagues have no problem using those agencies to get the things done they want to do. If you read their Project 2025, they want the President of the United States to be able to use the Department of Justice for the first time in American history to go after his political opponents. And to oh, well, if you disagree with that, then I'm delighted to hear it, Mr. Chairman.
Which Department of Justice going after political opponents? The Merrick Garland Department of Justice or the
Well, let's
next
see.
Department?
There's a case right now against the Democratic senator from New Jersey, Mr. Menendez. There's a case right now against a Democratic congressman from Texas.
I see a pattern with Democrats.
And well, wait a second. Now, don't be too clever. You're a smart man, but try to follow a principled argument. You just claimed that the Department of Justice was somehow biased against Republicans, and I'm naming you cases where the DOJ is going after Democrats. Your problem is the jury system in New York, which found unanimously that Donald Trump was guilty of 34 criminal felonies. That's got nothing to do with the Department of Justice.
Well, when the Department of Justice sends the number 3 guy down there to prosecute the case on behalf of the...
Which case are you referring to?
The Trump case that you just referred to.
You're talking about the District Attorney Bragg's case in New York?
The number 3 guy went down to
Okay.
New York.
All right, well, we'll have to take that up at another point, but I'm talking to you about what former President Trump says he wants to do. And if you think it's outrageous, then I am delighted to hear it, that he would use the Department of Justice.
No, I just thought it was outrageous you saying the Department of Justice under Trump was going to be weaponized when we believe that this Department of Justice has been pretty darn weaponized.
Well, what is the proof of that? I just named you 3 cases where the Department of Justice is going after Democrats. And, I mean, that's a very serious slur against the Department of Justice and the Attorney General.
I stand by that.
You stand by your slur then. Well, I would love us to have a complete hearing then on whether or not it's true, because I think it's wrong. And in fact, really it's just setting the stage for Donald Trump to try to use the Department of Justice as an instrument of persecution against his political opponents, real or imagined.
Well, we don't know if Donald Trump's going to be president or not. Are you throwing in the towel, Mr. Raskin?
No. I certainly hope he doesn't try to steal the election the way he did last time. And I hope we'll be prepared this time.
So you're an election denier, Mr. Raskin.
Oh, no. I don't deny it. I affirm that Joe Biden beat him by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the Electoral College. We know that happened. And yet, I hope you're not an insurrection denier, because you were there with me that day when they came in chanting, "Hang Mike Pence." Do you remember that?
I remember January the 6th.
You remember them chanting, "Hang Mike Pence"? Them trying to overthrow the election?
Unlike you, I have never not voted to certify an election.
I'm sorry?
Didn't you vote to not certify the 2016 election?
The 2016 election, I simply spoke against irregularities. I didn't try to overthrow the government of the United States. I didn't try to get the vice president not to do his job, and I didn't even go to a senator.
I've always voted to certify elections. I just want to state that for the record.
So then you would agree then that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election?
I voted to certify the election. I've said that a million times. When the 50 states...
Did you say once that Donald Trump lost the election?
I have said that. When the 50 states certified the election was over. Now, we've gone over. Do you want to conclude? Let's get off of this. Is a good EPA.
I don't mind the diversion, Mr. Chairman. But let me just say this. On the question of agencies in America, let's be clear about what the Supreme Court did. What the Supreme Court said was, of course, the agencies can adopt rules and regulations. My friend from Colorado was really mistaken about that. The agencies, even under their terrible ruling, can continue to adopt and promulgate regulations and rules under the notice and comment process we have. But the Supreme Court then, in this amazing power grab, arrogated to itself the power to determine whether or not an ambiguous or silent statute should be interpreted this way or that. So it was a political power grab by the court. That's all that they did. But Administrator Regan is doing his job. The EPA is doing its job. The NLRB is doing its job. The Department of Justice is doing the job. They've got to adopt rules. The Congress told them to. So that was a power grab by the court against the Congress of the United States. Now, what's interesting about Chevron is that was a 6-0 decision that the conservatives supported because it was giving Reagan administration era agency bureaucrats the right to revisit the way that statutes were being interpreted from the 1970s. They pushed for it then. Now they're saying they don't want the agencies to have that power. In any event, the people of America want you to have the power to have muscular enforcement of our rules for clean air, clean water, and clean climate. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. I will agree that the American people want clean air and clean water, and I think that's why we have an EPA. That's the role of the EPA, to ensure that we have clean air and clean water. And the role of the EPA is to ensure that if there are bad actors, people who pollute the water or pollute the air, then they're to be held accountable. The problem that we have with the EPA on our side of the aisle, and the problem that many industries in America have with the EPA, is we believe the EPA has overstepped its bounds. We believe that many of the people in the EPA, career-type people in the EPA, are interpreting the laws that Congress passes in the way they want to interpret the law, as opposed to the way Congress intends for the law to be interpreted. We fear that maybe your heart's in the right place on a lot of things, but you don't take into consideration the cost. We have a problem in this country, and the number one issue in this election, I think prior to the debate, the number one issue in this election is inflation. And a lot of the laws and a lot of the rules that we believe EPA is misinterpreting are having a significant cost on everyday average working Americans. If you look at what Mr. Burleson and I mentioned with respect to wastewater with meat processing plants, our processors and our farmers tell us this is going to have a significant impact on the cost of food. And we're talking about chicken McNuggets at McDonald's. We're talking about chicken at Chick-fil-A and things like that. The average working class Americans go through the drive-through after work and
Mr.
order.
Chairman, forgive me, do you know what the cost of 10-piece chicken McNuggets is today?
Well, I buy a lot of chicken nugget meals.
It's under $5. It's $4.49 at the closest one you can get here. I mean, and Impossible Nuggets are even less.
So there's no inflation at McDonald's, Mr. Raskin. I would say I spend more money at McDonald's than any person in Congress, and I'll stand by that. I'll testify under oath.
Well,
my 3 kids.
Well, we certainly don't mean to bankrupt you with our environmental regulations when you go to McDonald's.